There is this incredibly common, almost universal experience for everyday Christians today.
Oh, yeah.
You hit January 1st, right? And you've got your brand new Bible reading plan.
Yep. The highlighters are ready.
Exactly. Highlighters are ready, coffee is poured, and you are just fired up. You're going to read the whole thing this year.
This is the year.
This is the year, and you start off with this great momentum because Genesis is, frankly, an absolute page-turner.
It really is. I mean, you've got the creation of the cosmos. You've got all this intense family drama.
Betrayal, redemption, all of it.
Yeah, it's great narrative.
Right. And then you move right into Exodus, and it is pure cinematic blockbuster material.
Oh, absolutely. The plagues, parting the Red Sea.
Yeah, these miraculous rescues from this massive, oppressive empire. So you're sailing along, feeling great about your reading plan, and then
you hit the wall.
You hit it, this massive, intimidating, just entirely baffling brick wall that is the book of Leviticus.
It is, I've always said it's the ultimate graveyard of ambitious Bible reading plans.
That is exactly what it is, because suddenly the narrative just grinds to this absolute halt. You go from, crossing the Red Sea to being knee-deep in incredibly dense descriptions of animal entrails.
Yeah, and weird skin diseases.
Right. Very specific skin diseases, mold removal protocols, and just a frankly overwhelming number of these ancient rituals.
It's a huge shift in tone.
It really is. And it feels so strange, right? So totally disconnected from our modern lives that most of us just, we quietly skip it.
Yeah, we put it in the too hard basket.
Exactly. We skim a few Psalms instead, maybe read some Proverbs, and try to pick the actual story back up in the book of Numbers.
Which is such a shame.
It is. So our mission for this deep dive today is to rescue Leviticus from that skipped pile. We have a great stack of sources today, primarily the biblical text of Leviticus itself, along with some really fascinating historical research on ancient Near Eastern culture.
Which is so helpful for context.
Oh, it changes everything. And we are going to use them to decode this book. Because once you actually understand what is happening here, it completely stops being this dry, ancient rule book.
Right.
It becomes one of the most beautiful, profound invitations from God to his people in all of Scripture.
I love that. And to really understand that invitation, we first have to kind of ground ourselves in the immediate context of where we are in the story.
Yeah, set the scene for us.
Well, you have to remember what literally just happened to these people. The Israelites have just been freed from centuries of brutal generational slavery in Egypt.
Right.
And they have been led through this desolate wilderness to the base of Mount Sinai. And there, they have formally entered into a covenant with God.
Which is a huge deal.
Massive. Think of a covenant like a binding, almost marriage-like agreement. God is essentially saying, I will be your God, you will be my people, and here's exactly how we are going to live together.
And the people, they all agree to it, right?
Yeah, they do.
They essentially stand there and say, I do.
They say, I do. And then almost immediately, while Moses is literally still up on the mountain getting the actual physical terms of this covenant inscribed, the people completely rebel.
It's just wild to read.
It is. They panic, they gather up all their gold, and they build a golden calf to worship instead. They violate the very foundational terms of this relationship they literally just agreed to.
It is the ultimate betrayal right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Like they are breaking the vows on the honeymoon.
That's a great way to put it. Now, you have to remember, God's deep desire from the very beginning was for his glorious presence to actually physically dwell intimately among his people.
Right.
So following God's earlier instructions, they build the tabernacle. You can picture this as a magnificent, heavily embroidered, portable tent situated right in the very center of their camp.
And this serves as God's physical dwelling place on earth.
Exactly. But because of this horrific breach of trust with the golden calf, the relationship is just profoundly damaged.
Yeah.
So as the book of Exodus ends, the glory of God comes down and fills the tabernacle. But Moses, the leader of the entire nation, the mediator between God and the people, he can't even go inside.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because this creates the central tension of the entire book of Leviticus.
It really does.
You have a completely holy, pure, perfect God whose presence is now residing in a physical tent, sitting smack in the middle of a camp of everyday, flawed, selfish, and actively rebellious people.
Right.
So the core question is, how in the world can these everyday people possibly be reconciled to live in the presence of this intensely holy God without being entirely destroyed by their own corruption.
That is the exact problem Leviticus is trying to solve.
Hmm.
And to understand the solution, we really have to spend some time understanding the danger itself. We need to talk about what holiness actually is.
Yeah, because we have a lot of preconceived notions about that word.
Oh, completely. The Hebrew root word for holy is kadash, and it is used over 150 times in this book alone.
Yeah, 150.
Yeah, it's everywhere. But when modern people hear the word holy, we usually just think, morally good.
Right. We picture a really nice person who never swears, always pays their taxes, and helps old ladies cross the street.
Yeah, a Boy Scout.
Yeah.
Or maybe a really serene, quiet monk.
Exactly.
But biblically, Kadash means something far more intense and elemental. It means to be set apart. It means to be entirely unique and distinct from absolutely everything else.
Okay, set apart.
Yeah, God is set apart from everything else in existence because he is the ultimate uncreated creator. He is the very author of life itself.
Right.
And because God is the essence of pure life and pure goodness, when he appears in person, the physical space around him actually becomes holy. It becomes permeated with his raw, unadulterated life, power, and purity.
I love that. And I was trying to think of a way to visualize this for you, the listener, and I came up with this analogy. Let me know what you think.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine the most advanced, perfectly sterile, high-tech surgical operating room in the world.
Okay.
It is completely pure. The air is heavily filtered.
Yeah.
All the tools are sterilized. The environment is just perfectly controlled to sustain life and perform, say, delicate heart surgery.
Right.
Now imagine a guy who just spent 3 days rolling around in a toxic mud pit, covered in bacteria, chemical runoff, and just absolute filth, trying to casually stroll right into that operating room just to hang out.
That is a great analogy because the purity of that operating room isn't a bad thing. In fact, its purity is exactly what makes it good.
Right, you want it to be sterile.
It's necessary to save lives. But that pure environment is inherently, actively, aggressively hostile to the contamination the muddy guy is bringing in.
Exactly. The sterile room and the toxic mud, they simply cannot coexist peacefully.
No, they can't.
If the muddy guy walks in, either he completely ruins the sterility of the room, jeopardizing everything the room is built for, or the sterile systems of the room, like the chemical washes, the UV filters, the security, they are going to have to actively eliminate the contamination he brought in.
Right. And God's holiness is exactly like that perfectly pure, life-giving environment. Approaching it in a state of moral or physical contamination isn't just a breach of etiquette.
It's not just being rude.
No, it
Yeah.
is fundamentally incompatible.
Yeah.
And we actually see a really tragic, frankly chilling example of this exact incompatibility early on in Leviticus, specifically in chapters 8 through 10.
Right, the story of Aaron's sons.
Yes. So the book sets up the priesthood. These are the men designated to be the mediators, the ones who are supposed to carefully go between the people and God. Moses' brother Aaron and his sons are ordained as these priests.
Okay.
And they are given highly specific, very detailed instructions on how to safely enter this sterile operating room.
Right, the protocols.
Exactly. They have to wash a certain way, wear specific clothes, bring very specific offerings. But almost immediately after being ordained, 2 of Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, completely ignore the instructions.
Ignore them.
They grab their fire pans, offer what the text actually calls unauthorized fire, and just waltz right into God's presence, flagrantly violating the rules.
So they basically track the toxic mud right into the surgical suite.
Yes.
They treat this intensely pure environment like it's just a regular campfire. But wait, let's pause here, because why unauthorized fire? What does that actually mean in this context?
It's a great question. The text doesn't give us their exact psychological motivation, what they were thinking in that moment, but it implies a deep, profound arrogance.
Okay.
They didn't take God's boundaries seriously. They thought they could approach the creator of the universe on their own terms, maybe bringing their own concoction of incense or fire, just completely disregarding the careful, protective parameters God set up to keep them safe.
Wow.
And the result is immediate and terrifying. They are instantly consumed by fire coming out from the presence of the Lord. They die right there on the spot.
Man, that is heavy.
It is. What's fascinating here is the profound paradox it presents to the reader. God's holy presence is the absolute source of all life, beauty, and goodness in the universe.
Right.
But that very pure goodness becomes literally dangerous, lethal, even to those who stubbornly rebel and insult it.
Okay, so it's not that God is like sitting in the tent looking for an excuse to strike people with lightning.
No, not at all.
It's that his nature is so overwhelmingly pure that corruption simply combusts in his presence.
That's a great way to put it. It just combusts. And this establishes the absolute necessity, the core why behind the entire rest of the book.
Right.
It is objectively dangerous for Israel to live so incredibly close to God's presence in their current rebellious state.
Yeah, because they're carrying all this mud.
Exactly. So if they are going to survive this proximity, and if the relationship is going to be restored so God doesn't have to just pack up and abandon them, God has to provide a mechanism.
He needs to give them hazmat suits.
Yes. He has to provide the shielding. They, and specifically their mediating priests, must become holy.
So how does God actually design this rescue mission? Because from the outside, just reading Leviticus, it just feels like a random list of chores and bizarre rituals. But you're saying there is actually an architecture to how God solves this problem.
Oh, there's a brilliant architecture. You have to remember, ancient writers didn't use bold fonts or bullet points to organize their thoughts.
Right, they didn't have Microsoft Word.
Exactly. They used literary structures. Leviticus is designed symmetrically, kind of like a mirror or a series of concentric circles moving inward to a central point.
Okay, paint that picture for us.
So the outermost layer deals with the rituals and sacrifices the people bring. Then the next layer inward deals with the priests who facilitate those sacrifices.
Got it.
Moving inward again, we hit the laws regarding Israel's purity in everyday life. And then, right at the bullseye, the exact center of the book, is the Day of Atonement.
The ultimate climax.
Yes, where all these themes of holiness and purity entirely converge.
I want to start with that first outer layer, because this is where a lot of modern readers just completely check out. Chapters 1 through 7 are all about the sacrifices.
Ah, that's a lot.
We read about the blood, the burning of animal fat, the slaughtering of livestock right at the tabernacle entrance. And frankly, to a modern listener, it feels gross.
It does.
It feels incredibly archaic. I've heard people say, why all the animal sacrifices? It feels like something from a completely different religion.
I hear that all the time.
It feels very pagan, like they are trying to, I don't know, appease an angry volcano god by throwing a goat in so he doesn't destroy the village.
And honestly, that reaction makes perfect sense because that is exactly how animal sacrifice functioned in almost every other surrounding ancient Near Eastern culture at the time.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. In those cultures, sacrifice was all about appeasement and manipulation. The gods were viewed as petty, angry, and constantly hungry.
Yeah.
You feed the gods a bowl, you bribe them with some grain, you keep them happy so they give you rain for your crops and victory in battle.
Just paying off the mob.
Exactly. But the biblical narrative subverts that entire framework. To understand the sacrifices in Leviticus, you have to realize that Israel's God is not angry and on you. He's certainly not hungry. He doesn't need their food.
Okay, so if God doesn't need a bribe and he doesn't eat the meat, what is actually happening? Why all the blood?
To get what's really happening, we have to trace this mind-blowing thematic connection all the way back to the book of Genesis.
Okay, let's do it.
Think about the Garden of Eden. Eden was the original space of God's dwelling, where humans lived in perfect, unhindered harmony with him. It was a place of endless life.
Right.
But when humans rebelled, when they decided they wanted to redefine good and evil on their own terms, the relationship was broken. God had to remove them from the garden. And life outside the garden is marked by corruption, decay, and ultimately a return to dust.
It's marked by mortality.
Yes.
And you can't just stroll back into Eden whenever you feel like it.
No, you can't. Genesis tells us that God placed cherubim, these intense, mysterious, winged, angelic creatures, and a flaming sword at the entrance of the garden to block re-entry.
Okay.
The imagery is unmistakable. The way back to God's presence, the way back to the tree of life, is blocked by a lethal barrier. To try to enter the garden now in a state of rebellion means passing through the flaming sword. It literally means death.
Wait, so if the presence of God is guarded by cherubim and a flaming sword, what does that have to do with this tent in the wilderness?
Well, when you look really closely at the meticulous instructions God gave for building the tabernacle, you realize it is a deliberate, exact replica of that Eden setup.
No way.
Yes, the tabernacle is designed as a new micro-Eden. The entrance to the Holy of Holies, the very space where God's presence dwells, is a thick veil heavily embroidered with images of those exact same cherubim.
Wow.
And right outside that entrance, blocking the way for anyone trying to approach, is the bronze altar, the altar of the burnt offering, a place of constant burning fire.
Oh my goodness. The altar represents the flaming sword.
Yes.
It does.
Here's where it gets really interesting. So to get back into God's presence, to get back to the intimacy of Eden, the Israelites still have to pass the cherubim, and they still have to pass through the flaming sword.
And this is where the profound grace of the sacrificial system comes in. God knows that if a human walks into that fire with the weight of their rebellion, they die.
They're the toxic mud in the operating room.
Exactly. So through these specific offerings, God is graciously saying, I will accept the life of an innocent, flawless animal in your place.
Wow.
The mechanism works like this. An Israelite brings a pristine animal to the tabernacle. They physically place their hands on the animal's head, which is this deeply symbolic act of transferring their sin, their rebellion, and their impurity onto the animal.
Right.
The animal dies. Its lifeblood is poured out. The animal is placed on the altar and it goes through the flaming sword.
It symbolically passes through death so that the human doesn't have to.
That completely flips the script on how I've always viewed these chapters.
Yeah.
It's not about an angry deity demanding a pound of flesh because he's throwing a tantrum.
No, not at all.
It's about a merciful God providing a substitute so that a rebellious human isn't consumed by the necessary purity of his holiness. The sacrifice isn't a bribe. It's a profound, incredibly visceral reminder of the cost of their sin.
Yes.
It shows them in a very sensory, bloody way that their rebellion introduces death into God's good world. But God would rather provide a substitute than destroy them.
And Leviticus actually outlines 5 distinct types of these offerings, and each one has a slightly different nuance.
Okay, walk us through them.
Well, you have the burnt offering, where the whole animal is offered up, and that represents complete surrender.
Yeah.
You have the grain offering, which is a token of thanksgiving, acknowledging that God provides all their sustenance. Then you have the sin or purification offering, which specifically uses the blood to cleanse the tabernacle from the pollution of the people's impurities. And the guilt or reparation offering, which involves paying restitution when you've wronged someone or defrauded them. But then there's the peace offering or the fellowship offering.
I want to camp out on the peace offering for a second because I feel like it highlights something so unique about how God views this relationship. Explain how the peace offering worked, because they didn't burn the whole animal for that one, right?
No, they didn't. In the peace offering, the fat and certain portions were offered to God on the altar, and a small portion was given to the priest. But the vast majority of the meat was given back to the worshiper.
Okay.
And they were instructed to take that meat, sit down right there in the courtyard of the tabernacle, and eat it with their family and friends.
So it was literally a barbecue in the presence of God.
It was a sacred feast. It wasn't just about dealing with the negative aspect of sin. It was about restoring harmony. It was a celebration of the relationship. God is essentially saying, your sin is covered. The barrier of the flaming sword is satisfied. Now, sit down and have a meal with me. In the ancient Near East, eating a meal with someone was the ultimate sign of peace and covenant loyalty. It's an incredibly intimate picture of grace.
It really is. It takes these chapters that feel like a slaughterhouse and turns them into a story about a creator desperately trying to host a dinner party with the people who betrayed him. Actually, let me pause right here for a second because I want to talk directly to you, our listener. Did you ever realize that the altar and the cherubim in the tabernacle were a direct callback to the Garden of Eden? I mean, my mind is completely blown by that. We want to hear your aha moments. So if you're watching this, pause the video right now, head down to the comments, and let us know your thoughts on that Eden connection. And while you're down there, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a deep dive into God's Word with us. Okay, so we've looked at the outer layer of the sacrifices. What happens when we move to the next section?
After dealing with the priests, the text moves into chapters 11 through 15, the purity laws.
Oh boy.
And man, if the sacrifices make modern readers uncomfortable, this section just leaves people utterly confused.
Confused is an understatement. I mean, we are talking about highly specific, ancient rules regarding what makes a person ritually impure. There are rules about reproductive fluids, a woman giving birth, dealing with weird, flaking skin diseases, what to do if you find a patch of mold on your clothes or in the walls of your house, and strict prohibitions against touching dead bodies or animal carcasses. Reading it today, you naturally ask, does God just hate germs? Is it somehow a moral failure, like an actual sin, to get mildew in your basement because it rained too much?
This raises such an important question, and it is so vital that we correct a massive, almost universal misconception right here. In the biblical worldview, being impure or unclean was not a sin.
Say that again because I think that trips up so many people when they read these chapters. We've been conditioned to think unclean automatically equals sinful.
I know, but being ritually impure was absolutely not a sin. It was not a moral failure. Look at the things that caused it.
Yeah.
Giving birth. God literally commanded humanity to be fruitful and multiply.
Right.
Having a normal menstrual cycle. Burying a deceased family member who passed away from old age. These are normal, unavoidable, and often deeply honorable parts of everyday human life. Impurity was simply a temporary state, usually lasting a week or two, after which you would wash yourself, wait for the evening, and you'd be ritually clean again.
Okay, I have to push back here. If it's not a sin and it's just normal everyday life,
Yeah.
what is the actual issue? Why group childbirth, mold, and dead bodies into the exact same category? What is the common thread?
The issue goes back to what we established earlier about the nature of God's holiness. God is the author of life. He is the essence of pure, unending vitality. The things that made an Israelite ritually impure bodily fluids related to the reproductive cycle, diseases that cause the skin to decay and flake off, mold that eats away at the structural integrity of a home, and certainly touching dead bodies, all of these things have one common denominator. They all represent mortality.
Wow.
They are symbols of the loss of life or the leakage of life force. They are the slow decay that entered the human experience when we were exiled from Eden.
Oh, wow. So it's not about hygiene at all. It's a fundamental clash between life and death.
Exactly. Because God's space, the tabernacle, is a micro-Eden, a concentrated realm of pure life. It is fundamentally incompatible with the realm of death.
Right.
The actual sin would be for an Israelite to arrogantly march into God's pure, life-giving presence while carrying the symbols of mortality and death upon them. It's like bringing a symbol of the curse right into the face of the Creator.
Yeah.
God is saying, acknowledge the weight of mortality. When you brush up against death or the loss of life or the decay of the world, take a week. Stop. Wash yourself. Remind yourself that you are a mortal creature and I am the eternal God.
That is so profound.
Then once you are ceremonially clean and have recognized that distinction, come back into my presence.
That makes so much sense. It's a physical object lesson about life and death that they literally had to live out in their bodies. But what about the food?
The food laws.
Because right before the laws about skin diseases in Chapter 11, we get the famous kosher dietary laws. You can eat cattle and sheep, but no pigs. You can eat certain fish, but absolutely no shellfish.
Yeah.
No bats, no vultures. Again, people always try to find a medical or scientific reason for this, like maybe undercooked pork was dangerous in the desert heat, or bottom-feeding shrimp carry toxins, so God was just giving them this ancient health code.
People have debated those theories for centuries. Some scholars argue for hygiene. Some argue that these specific animals were closely tied to the pagan sacrificial systems of surrounding nations.
Right.
And while there might be elements of truth to those theories, the biblical text itself actually doesn't give us the explicit medical or cultural why. It simply says, these are clean for you, these are unclean.
So if we don't know the exact reason for every single animal, what is the overarching point of making their diet so incredibly restrictive?
The clear point is that these animals served as a daily, unavoidable cultural symbol. God was separating Israel from the other nations. He was building a visible boundary wall around them.
Think about how many times a day you eat. 3 times a day, plus snacks, right? Eating is the most common human activity.
Absolutely.
So by restricting their diet, God was forcing the Israelites to realize that His holiness, this reality that He has set apart and they are His chosen people, should impact every single mundane area of their everyday lives.
Yes.
It wasn't just about what they did at the tabernacle once a year. It was about what was on their dinner plates on a random Tuesday afternoon. Every time they sat down for a meal, they had to stop and ask, is this food appropriate for a people who belong to a holy God?
It turned the dinner table into a daily classroom for devotion and identity.
Exactly.
And that identity as a holy people brings us to the very center of the book, the focal point of the architectural mirror we talked about earlier, chapter 16 and 17, the Day of Atonement, or in Hebrew, Yom Kippur.
The big one.
This is the single most important day in the Israelite calendar.
Okay, I'm looking at chapters 16 and 17, and it looks like this massive reset button for the whole nation. But I don't quite understand why the daily sacrifices we talked about earlier weren't enough. Why do they need a separate, elaborate day for this?
Well, think about the daily life in a camp of over 1 million people. People are sinning, people are becoming impure, and yes, they're offering individual sacrifices when they realize they've done wrong.
Right.
But what about the sins that were committed in secret? What about the rebellion that people didn't repent of? What about the impurities that just went unnoticed? Over the course of a year, this moral and ritual pollution starts to accumulate in the camp, and symbolically, it pollutes the tabernacle itself.
Oh, I see.
The sterile operating room is slowly getting dirty, gathering invisible bacteria. So once a year, God instituted a massive, comprehensive, deep clean of the sanctuary.
How did this deep clean actually work? Walk us through the steps.
It happens in three main movements. First, the preparation. The high priest has to carefully wash himself, and interestingly, he takes off his glorious, ornate, jewel-covered priestly garments.
Wait, so he takes his fancy robes off.
He does. He doesn't go in looking like a king. He puts on a simple, plain white linen tunic. He enters as a humble servant, stripping away any status before God.
That's a powerful image.
Yeah.
And then comes the cleansing ritual itself, right?
Yes. The high priest takes 2 goats to represent the entire nation. He sacrifices a bull for his own sins first to make sure he's clean, and then he sacrifices the first goat as a purification offering for the people.
Okay.
He takes the blood of that goat, which, remember, represents its pure, innocent life given as a substitute, and he walks all the way into the inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies, past the cherubim. He walks right up to the Ark of the Covenant.
For our listener who might not be super familiar with the Ark of the Covenant, beyond seeing Indiana Jones, what exactly was it, and why is he putting blood on it?
Great clarification. The Ark of the Covenant was a wooden chest covered entirely in gold. Inside it were the stone tablets containing the 10 Commandments, the core terms of their covenant with God.
Yeah.
And on top of this chest was a solid gold cover, flanked by 2 sculpted cherubim. This gold cover was essentially viewed as God's throne, or his footstool on earth. It was the white-hot center of God's presence.
Okay.
So the high priest takes the blood of the substitute goat and sprinkles it on this cover. The text says this makes atonement, which in Hebrew literally means to wipe away or cover.
So the blood of the substitute acts almost like a spiritual cleansing agent, wiping away the accumulated defilement and pollution of the people's sins from God's holy space.
That's exactly right. That is the first half of the solution. God's space is purified, the operating room is sterile again. But what about the people's lingering guilt? What about the psychological weight of their rebellion?
Right, they still feel it.
Exactly. That's the third movement, the scapegoat ritual.
This has to be one of the most powerful visual object lessons in the whole Bible. The first goat is dead, but what happens to the second goat?
The high priest comes out of the tent to the second goat, the one that is still alive. He lays both of his hands firmly on the head of the goat, and he loudly, publicly confesses all the wickedness, all the rebellion, and all the secret sins of the Israelites.
Wow.
He symbolically transfers the entire weight of the nation's guilt onto this animal, and then they don't sacrifice it on the altar. They lead it away out of the camp far into the desolate wilderness and just let it go.
It's like an ancient version of a toxic waste containment protocol.
Yes.
If the camp is a populated zone and the sins of the people are this highly radioactive waste, the priest carefully loads all that toxicity into a secure containment vessel, the goat, and physically drives it miles away into an uninhabited wasteland where it can't harm anyone anymore.
That is a fantastic way to grasp the mechanics of it. You have 2 goats providing one complete solution. The first goat's blood purifies the space, paying the lethal price for the sin, and the second goat physically, visually carries the guilt away.
Man.
Imagine being an ordinary Israelite standing at the edge of the camp, burdened by your failures over the past year, watching that scapegoat disappear over the horizon. You are watching your sins literally being removed from your presence.
That's incredible.
It captures the heart of God so perfectly. He is both paying the severe price for sin, and he is actively removing it as far as the east is from the west.
It's beautiful. It really is. It shows a God who is bending over backward to maintain the relationship. So you have a massive reset button. But as we move past Yom Kippur, out from the center of the book into chapters 18 through 20, the tone shifts a bit.
It does.
It feels like God is saying, okay, the tent is clean, but how are you treating each other?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where we see that God's holiness isn't just a mystical, abstract concept confined to the tabernacle. It has extreme practical social implications.
Right.
Leviticus 19 is often called the holiness code. God says to the people, "Be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy." And then he proceeds to define exactly what that looks like in everyday life.
And it looks a lot like justice.
It does. It looks like leaving the edges of your wheat fields unharvested, what they call the gleanings. You don't strip your fields entirely bare.
Okay.
You purposefully leave some grain behind so that the poor, the widow, the orphan, and the immigrant can come and gather food with dignity.
It's an ancient social safety net built right into their agricultural practices. You don't maximize your profits at the expense of the vulnerable.
Exactly. It looks like using honest scales in your business practices, not cheating your customers by tampering with the weights. It looks like not holding back the wages of a hired worker overnight. God is explicitly saying, you cannot claim to be devoted to me in the tabernacle if you are exploiting your neighbor in the marketplace.
Right? Your vertical relationship with God must profoundly dictate your horizontal relationship with other people.
Yes.
Okay, I have to bring this up because whenever everyday Christians talk about Leviticus 19, there is one very specific, very modern question that always surfaces.
I think I know where you're going.
It's the tattoo question.
Yep.
Leviticus 19, verse 28 says, "Do not cut your bodies for the dead or put tattoo marks on yourselves. I am the Lord." So what do we do with that? I know so many believers who have tattoos. Does this mean everyday Christians living today shouldn't get ink? Is getting a tattoo inherently sinful based on this one verse?
This is such a great case study in how to read the Bible faithfully in its ancient context. If you just isolate that one sentence and paste it on a billboard, it seems like a blanket ban on all tattoos forever.
Right.
But context is everything. First, let's look at the immediate literary context of the surrounding verses. This prohibition sits right in the middle of a list of rules that were highly specific to keeping Israel visibly distinct from the Canaanites who lived in the land around them.
Okay.
Right before the tattoo verse, it says not to wear garments woven of two kinds of material, like wool and linen. It says not to trim the edges of your beard in a specific way.
And nobody today is having a theological crisis over wearing a cotton polyester blend t-shirt or fading their beard at the barber. We recognize those aren't universal moral laws for all time.
Right. We inherently recognize those as cultural markers intended to keep ancient Israel separate. So what was the cultural marker regarding tattoos? Look at the very first half of verse 28. Do not cut your bodies for the dead. The Hebrew text draws a very close parallel line between cutting your body and getting these marks. In the ancient Near East, the Canaanites and other surrounding pagan nations practiced elaborate, often bloody mourning rituals and necromancy.
Wow.
When someone died, they would literally slash their own skin and rub ash or ink into the open wounds. This was done as a way of appealing to the gods of the underworld or practicing divination, trying to commune with the spirits of the dead.
Oh, so it wasn't about someone getting a picture of a butterfly on their ankle or a sleeve with their kids' names on their arm. It was tied to ancient witchcraft and bloodletting.
Not at all. God was explicitly telling Israel, you are a holy people, set apart for the God of life. Do not engage in the pagan, bloody, desperate mourning rituals of your neighbors who worship false gods of death. He wanted them entirely separate from those specific idolatrous practices. To read this verse as a universal condemnation of the modern concept of decorative ink is to completely rip it out of its historical setting. It was about allegiance to the God of life and rejecting the occult practices of the Canaanites.
That historical context completely changes how you read it. It's not an arbitrary rule from a cosmic killjoy. It's a protective boundary. And really, that's what all of Leviticus 19 is about. In fact, Jesus himself validated this section of Leviticus in a massive way, didn't he, when he was summarizing the entire law?
He absolutely did. When Jesus was asked by the religious leaders what the greatest commandment in all of Scripture was, he answered by quoting two verses. First, he said to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, which is quoting Deuteronomy. But then he said the second is like it, and he quoted Leviticus 19, verse 18. Love your neighbor as yourself.
Jesus reaches right into the middle of Leviticus to pull out the defining ethic of his kingdom. Love your neighbor. If you want to reflect the holiness of God, you don't just do it through ritual purity, you do it by fiercely seeking the flourishing of the people around you.
Yes. The ritual purity was to prepare them for God's presence, but the moral purity was to display God's character to the rest of the world.
So let's pull all of this together. We've walked through the sacrifices and how they act as a substitute to bypass the flaming sword. We've looked at the purity laws and how they teach the difference between the mortality of the world and the life-giving nature of God.
Right.
We've gone deep into the Day of Atonement, watching the scapegoat carry the toxic waste of the nation's guilt into the desert. And we've seen how all of this is supposed to result in a community that fiercely loves their neighbors. We've seen the whole mirror-like structure of the book.
We have covered a lot of ground.
We really have. But the big dramatic cliffhanger that we started with was this. Moses is locked outside the tent. The relationship is broken. The sterile operating room is closed off because of the toxic mud of the people's rebellion with the golden calf.
Yes.
So what does this all mean? We get to the end of the 27 chapters of Leviticus, and we have to ask, did it work? Did all these rules, these bloody sacrifices, these meticulous rituals actually solve the problem?
To find the answer to that, you literally just have to turn the page.
Okay.
You finish the last verse of Leviticus, and you look at the very first sentence of the very next book, Numbers chapter 1, verse 1, and it says this. The Lord spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting.
Yes, he made it inside.
He made it inside. It worked. God's gracious, highly intricate, deeply meaningful system actually worked. The barrier of death was bypassed through the sacrificial substitute. The impurity of mortality was managed. The scapegoat carried away the overwhelming guilt. The relationship, though fragile and requiring constant maintenance, was restored. God provided a way for a stubborn, flawed, rebellious people to actually live in peace with a completely holy God.
It is a massive victory. It entirely transforms Leviticus from this daunting, confusing brick wall into this beautiful, bloody, desperate rescue mission that ends in triumph.
It really does. And I want to leave you, our listener, with one final provocative thought to chew on as we wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah, please do.
Think about everything we just discussed today. Think about the incredible, meticulous lengths God went to, the architecture of the tabernacle, the establishment of the priesthood, the daily sacrifices, the Yom Kippur scapegoat.
It's exhausting just to read about it.
It is. God instituted this massive, exhausting system just so his presence could safely dwell among the ancient Israelites in a physical, portable tent made of animal skins.
Right, just to be near them in the camp.
If God went to such extreme lengths just to be near his people then, how much more profound is it to realize what happened centuries later? The New Testament writers tell us that Jesus was the ultimate fulfillment of all of this.
Yeah.
He is the final, perfect sacrifice who passed through the flaming sword. He is the true high priest. He is the ultimate scapegoat who carried our guilt outside the city gates. Because of what Jesus accomplished, the thick veil in the temple, the one embroidered with the cherubim blocking the way, was torn completely in two.
Yeah.
And now God's holy, pure, life-giving presence no longer resides at a physical tent or a building made of stone. Through his Spirit, God desires to dwell directly within you. You are the temple.
Oh, wow.
The sterile operating room isn't a building anymore. He has made you holy so that he can reside intimately in you.
The mud has been permanently washed away, the system worked, the barrier is gone, and the invitation is wide open. That is absolutely incredible. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Leviticus. Keep reading, keep asking questions, and we will see you next time.